District of Conservation is sponsored by CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Welcome to episode 221 of District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. Before I introduce and preview today's special guest, I want to give you guys a little, insight into what I'm going to be up to for the next few weeks. Podcasts may be a little less frequent. We will have some episodes, but I'm going to Michigan this week to do a ladies' blast trip with Brownells, and you may know some of the women I'll be hunting with, so that'll be interesting. We're going to target grouse and woodcock. I've never hunted in an environment like this, so it'll be a great learning experience. I'll do my best to document it on video and also for audio format, talking to some of the fellow participants. And I'll give you kind of my honest overview of it, because I hear it is a little bit difficult to target this type of upland bird, and the landscape is a little more strenuous. So I'll take it in, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity. So you'll see me in Michigan over the course of the next few days doing that. And today's guest is Chairman Newhouse of the Congressional Western Caucus. So we have spoken to and talked about natural resources, and I've often referenced the Congressional Western Caucus, but it's the voice of rural America, and we're talking to Chairman Dan Newhouse, who is a lifelong resident of Central Washington, who represents the 4th Congressional District. He is a third-generation Yakima Valley farmer who brings real-world experience to Congress as a businessman and former state legislator who supports conservative solutions that encourage job creation and economic opportunity in Central Washington. And he also serves on different various committees. And a really fun fact, obviously back to his farming background, him and his family operate a 850-acre farm where they grow hops, tree fruit, and grapes. We talk about 30-30, their plans to fight it, and what you can look forward to, and why you should check out their podcast, the Congressional Western Caucus podcast too. Here's my conversation with Chairman Dan Newhouse of the Congressional Western Caucus. Take a listen. We are thrilled to be joined by Chairman Dan Newhouse, representing Washington's 4th Congressional District, and he is helping lead the effort to advance true conservation practices from both the center-right perspective and also from a more broad-based bipartisan coalition. So Chairman Newhouse, thank you so much for speaking with me on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Gabriella. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be with you to talk about some really important issues that are impacting people all over the country, but particularly in the Western United States. And, you know, the Biden administration has put forth this 30 by 30 initiative, and we've got some current concerns about that. And I really appreciate you taking some time to shine some light on what's happening.
Certainly. And before we dive deep into the 30-30 alternative that the caucus has put out, why don't you introduce yourself to my listeners more, talk more about your district, some of the priorities you've had since you've taken over the caucus?
Sure. Well, thanks. Well, as an introduction, I'm in my 4th term. My name's Dan Newhouse. I represent Central Washington State, which Pacific Northwest is a very unique part of the country, a very beautiful part of the country. I live in the south central part of the state. My district covers essentially the middle 1/3 of the whole state. So I represent from Canada to Oregon, from the Cascade Mountains east to the 5th Congressional District, which is Kathy McMorris Rogers. And we have a very unique district, from timberland in the north, agricultural farming and ranching throughout the district. We have an abundant amount of very diverse portfolio of energy production, like hydropower, wind, solar, nuclear, and just a very beautiful part of the world to live. I'm very proud to represent this area. I'm a farmer myself. I live, like I said, in the Yakima Valley, south central part of the state. We raise hops, tree fruit, and wine grapes on our farm. And it's a busy time of year, as you can imagine, in the fall on farms right now. Starting to wind down, starting to get to the end of the harvest. So it's that time of year everybody looks forward to. I am the chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus, and I also serve on the Appropriations Committee, where My subcommittee responsibilities are energy and water, the legislative branch, and also, as you might guess, agriculture.
Yes, you have been involved quite a bit. And because of your background, I think you seem qualified to talk about these issues and actually lead on policy, especially in response to what the Biden administration is doing. And we'll talk more about some of the legislative priorities you and the caucus have. But something you guys just unveiled was your alternative to 3030, which you've deemed the Western Conservation Principles. You co-posted that with the Senate Chairman, Senator Steve Daines. Both of you put out a mission or a video statement yesterday discussing it briefly. So why don't you talk about the report and how does it differ from 3030 and whether or not we already are conserving 30% of waters and lands?
That's a great beginning way to start discussing this. As you just said, the Biden administration has proposed this initiative, 30 by 30. They've actually now rebranded it to call it America the Beautiful, which its goal, near as we can tell, and that's part of the problem. It's very vague. There's no specifics. We don't really know how they want to accomplish what their goals are and in what fashion they're going to do this. But they want to set aside or preserve at least 30% of the lands in the United States, the lands and waters of the United States. And that's the problem, which sounds great, right? That we're all for conservation, absolutely. But there's devil is always in the details. There are no specifics to this. What does this mean? What does it mean? There should always be a little bit of a concern when the federal government says we're coming and we're here to help. And you've heard that before, and this is no different. We're concerned that they're looking at ways that they can essentially lock up and throw away the key to many of the lands in the Western United States, versus what we're proposing in our alternative is to look at some of the things that we already do, the great work that's already being done in conserving lands, natural resources, and waters, utilizing local conservation programs, tribes, local governments, private entities, state governments. Lots of work is already being done, and we've accomplished a tremendous amount. In fact, we already have more than 30% of the lands in the United States under some kind of conservation program. So it really does concern us when the federal government says, hey, we're going to come in and preserve 30% of the country. What does that mean? What does that mean to private property rights? What does that mean to the work that's already being done, that's tried and true, that's based on science, that's accomplishing the things that we need to do to have working lands while at the same time preserving and conserving the natural resources that we have? One of the things that many of my constituents are always bring up is access to federal lands. So when the federal government says we're going to preserve lands, does that mean that we're going to restrict the ability of Americans to utilize the public lands that we have? What does that mean to hunting and fishing and all the recreational activities that so many people enjoy? So there's a lot of questions, and we need more specifics. So we took it upon ourselves to come up with some of the things that are already happening, some of those partnerships that I mentioned that are already in place and accomplishing such a great deal. It's not hard to look at the record of the federal government and know that it's not a good one. All you have to do, in fact, from my home in central Washington, most of the summer, all I had to do was look out the window to be reminded of the poor management practices that the federal government uses because of the smoke that filled the air in central Washington, in fact, all over the West most of this summer. Our forests, our national forests are a disaster. Millions of acres that are dead and dying and subject to catastrophic wildfires every year, which is just a horrible thing wildlife, for people, for property, for the natural resources that we depend on. We've got to do a better job in making sure that our national assets, those resources that the federal government is responsible for, are better cared for. So yes, we have questions when the federal government wants to take on more, wants to do more, and push aside those things that we know are working. So that's why we came up with this. Make sure that we move forward in a positive direction. Make sure that this administration understands as much as we possibly can, make it clear to them that what we're doing, sure, we can always improve, but let's not stop the good work that's happening in this country and replace it with a lock it up and throw away the key attitude that will really not further conservation efforts at all.
Do you worry that they're pushing a preservationist kind of ideal and conflating it with conservation? Because we keep seeing, I've noticed that they have a habit of conflating the two philosophies. One, true conservation says wise use and preservation says no use. So does that trouble you and your colleagues as well to see the America the Beautiful plan branded as conservation, but it more so kind of resembles preservation?
I think it's more than resembles. It's absolutely, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly what we're concerned with. Like I said, just closing access and utilization of our, for instance, our national forest has proven to be catastrophic because of the millions of acres that are burning every year because of lack of management. So we can't just put a fence around these places, a literal or a figurative fence, and call them conserved or preserved even, because naturally things are going to happen, and we see it every summer in the catastrophic wildfires. So yes, we absolutely are concerned that that's the direction the federal government wants to go. Limit access, limit activity, limit working lands that, to me and to members of my caucus, know that you can conserve and also preserve working lands. They're not mutually exclusive. They can go hand in hand.
Aside from proactive forest management, I was combing through the plan and I saw some other policies prescriptions. What else also stuck out to you as being a priority? I saw shared stewardship, reforming the Endangered Species Act, and some other items. So what else do you think my listeners would be interested by the report?
Like I wanted to make sure that people understand that there's a lot of work going on now with local conservation districts, with tribes, with local governments, with a lot of private entities actually out there as well. But there's, along with some of the things you mentioned, there are definitely some improvements that need to be made moving forward. One is, I guess you could put under the heading of litigation reform. As you know, many of the practices of the Forest Service are essentially stopped dead in their tracks because of the real threat, and the realization of litigation. There's many groups out there that are constantly suing the Forest Service because of proposed practices in the national forest, which, conservation efforts do not happen in the courtroom. Wasting time and money in lawsuits in order to try to move forward, we see the results of that every single year in these catastrophic fires. We're not able to move forward in a positive way to do the management work that needs to be done in our national forests. We need to modernize the Endangered Species Act. That's something that we've been working on in Congress for many years. A very small percentage of the species that have been listed, I think we can look at a 3% success rate of listing species and actually being able to say, oh, that species has recovered. So, and the problem with that is those species remain on the list. Many of them are never taken off. So we continue to, instead of investing resources into other species, we continue to spend resources on species that don't need that attention, diluting the whole effort and not allowing us to be successful removing species from the list overall. So NEPA reform is another huge issue, that regulatory reform in all areas slows down the ability of the federal government and other interested parties from doing anything. That getting permits to accomplish anything on federal lands takes years. And many people just cannot afford to go through the hoops and the challenges that are put up in front of them in order to accomplish activities and work that needs to be done on our national forests and our national lands. So that's another area that definitely needs serious reform.
I will encourage everyone to read the report. It's short. It's about 11 pages, which is very helpful rather than being something in the ballpark of 1,000 pages. But it's a very comprehensive, very simple document that I think my listeners will take great enjoyment of, seeing that there's a contrast. I also wanted to ask you, Chairman Newhouse, what are some of the other legislative priorities you have in addition to maybe starving off any challenges from the Biden administration? Is there anything kind of more proactive that you think you could see some momentum build up for?
Yeah, I think there are some areas that we definitely should be able to see some improvement and movement on. We've been engaged since day one of this administration with some of the mineral extraction activities in this country. You saw the moratorium on oil and gas permitting by the administration early on. We're trying to do all we can to educate people as to the importance of our ability to continue some of these mining activities throughout the Western United States, instead of being dependent on foreign sources for many of the important elements that we need, particularly in some of the administration wants to move forward with many of the climate initiatives that require many of the minerals that we're mining right here in the Western United States. So we want to be able to do that domestically instead of being dependent on foreign sources such as China. We're working, as we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I'm a farmer. Water in the Western United States is essential. Without adequate resources of water, we can't grow as a population. We can't grow our agricultural industry. We can't do anything. And so we've got to continue moving forward, enhancing our ability to provide much needed water resources throughout the West. That is key to being successful into the future. Other things that we're looking at would be forest management issues, as we talked about earlier. We're making some progress there. We've got a large backlog of acres that need to be managed, but we've been legislatively, Congress has been able to provide the Forest Service with some direction and some resources over the last several years that I think will help. But like I said, the thing about that is we're so far behind. It's not going to be solved in 1 year. This is going to take some time, and it's going to require commitment on the part of bureaucrats throughout agencies to get the needed work done, accomplished. And so Congress has to exert its ability to push agencies in that direction to make sure that commitment is there.
Thank you for the overview. And is there an update? I'm not sure if this was in your purview, but I think probably your caucus members, I know, had sounded the alarm on this. Is there any update yet on the CDC and Fish and Wildlife Service petitions that would undercut at legal hunting and transport of game meat? I don't know if you paid attention to that, but they were trying to use the coronavirus to prevent people from transporting wild game meat and skins and other animal parts across state lines.
Well, Gabriella, I'm going to have to see what I can find out more about that before the answer is I don't know. So let me do some work.
No worries.
Into that, yeah.
Yeah, I think Congressman Westerman probably is a little more attuned to that, but I was just curious if you knew, but if not, it's perfectly fine. Is there anything else that you want to address? I know you also just launched a podcast too to talk about all these important issues out West.
Yeah, I hope you don't see that as competition.
No, not at all.
We're working in conjunction with you to highlight some of the things that are important that we're working on. That, with as you said, we're trying to work in as much a bipartisan fashion as possible. So I think a lot of our job is to educate people that aren't aware. Many of my friends across the aisle are from other parts of the country that just do not understand the dynamic that we have in the Western United States and in rural areas throughout the country. If you represent an urban district, that's your world, that's your perspective. And so your opinions and your beliefs are formed by your environment that you see. So this is an effort on our part to open the eyes of people that don't live in rural areas, that don't have the experience that those of us in the West and rural areas of the country have. And so that they can maybe begin to understand and realize the importance of what we're talking about when we say, hey, this for instance, this 30 by 30 initiative, this is a concern, and here's why. And so that's our goal. And I've been very happy with many of the people that have been helping us spread that word and get the information out there that will help people understand. So, and thanks to you for adding to that. That's very, very helpful.
Certainly. No, and this space needs to have, I think, more of our perspective in it because it seems to be clouded a lot with more preservationist thinking. So no, the more the merrier. I don't corner the market. So you're perfectly fine to podcast in it as well. I think it's important to have lawmakers like yourselves who are the key deciders in policy making to be chiming in on these issues too, because I can only say so much. I don't deal with this directly. I'm just reporting and observing. So it's very important that members like yourself can communicate this on a regular basis too.
Well, this is the life we live. Our livelihoods depend on policies that are being considered in our communities. If when you close a mine, for instance, in New Mexico, where the large majority of the jobs in the local community are dependent on that mine, that has a huge impact on that community, on the school system, on the hospitals, on everything. And we need people to understand and to realize the effects of words on pieces of paper that are debated and discussed in Washington, D.C. really do impact people's lives. And so this is important work that we're all engaged in here. And I'm just very happy that we have an opportunity in such a, using the technology we have available to us today to be able to reach so many people.
If I can be of help in any way, please let me know. I would love to disseminate any information and resources as best as I can to my listeners and also to people who follow me on social media, because I think there's so much going on in the news cycle. Obviously, people don't really pay attention to these issues, so they have to find a channel where things can be properly shared. So I would be happy to be a resource and share the caucus's resources and updates as best as I can.
Great. Look forward to that. Look forward to working with you.
Chairman Newhouse, where can everyone connect with you and the caucus to learn more about your alternative to 3030, bills that you will be working on, and any updates or challenges to the Biden administration's policy aims?
So all those things can be accessed at Western Caucus on Twitter. That's probably the easiest thing to do, where you can see the Western conservation principles that we've come up with. They can follow much of the work that we're doing, some of these information and educational pieces that we've been working on. You can also go to our website, which is westerncaucus.house.gov, and also can find many of the same materials right there, and follow all the important work that the members of the Western Caucus are engaged in, which I should have said, Gabriella. The Western Caucus is as it says, focused much on Western United States issues. But we have members from all over the country. Savannah, Georgia, Arkansas, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, South Carolina. There's members all over the country that understand that issues in the West are very similar to issues in their rural areas. So our 70 plus membership represents almost every corner of the country. And we're all united in making sure that people understand that living in rural areas is a great way of life, and we need to do what we can to preserve and conserve our ability to do that.
That's very reassuring. Excellent. Thank you so much, Chairman Newhouse, for speaking with me. Really appreciate your thoughts. I think a lot of people appreciate what congressional Republicans like yourselves are doing to promote true conservation practices. So thank you so much for speaking with me.
Absolutely, Gabriella. Look forward to doing more of this. So thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you're following us on your preferred podcast player. We like to recommend Apple Podcasts because Apple is where most of our listenership hails from. So if you head over to Apple, subscribe, comb through some episodes, and leave us reviews, we'd be more than appreciative of your support in that manner. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. And you can connect with me personally on my social media feeds. All of the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram links that I have are all denoted by blue check marks. Really easy to find me, so engage with me there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to recommend yourself for the show as a prospective guest, I'm all ears to hear and sift through different inquiries. I get a lot of requests, and my schedule is also quite busy, so you'll see guests come from me, but like I said, I'm always open to different guests coming on the show.